Amistimet glanse. A joke aimed at you during a meeting. A small remark laced with sarcasm. Or simply a strange tone when someone speaks to you slightly louder than usual. Slightly intentional. That's how disrespect begins. Small. Subtle. Full of implication. And this is something no one says directly. Disrespect that is ignored is disrespect that is accepted. Machiavelli saw this clearly, centuries ago, that in a world where power is defined not only by action, but by how others react to you, silence is no longer a virtue. It is the surrender of sovereignty. He once wrote, "A ruler doesn't need to be loved, but he must make others cautious." And you, even if you're not a king, are being tested like that every single day. At first, you stay silent because you think it's not worth reacting. You don't want to make a big deal out of it. You tell yourself maybe you're overthinking. But then it repeats, this time louder, clearer, in front of others. Another joke at a family dinner. A group tag you're left out of. A subtle comment on social media. Gradually, people stop guessing. They become certain you won't do anything. And once people know you won't react, they won't stop. The problem doesn't lie in their first behavior. The problem lies in your first response. And once you let it pass, you've quietly opened the door for the next time. When people become certain that you won't react, they start to push further. A harsher word. A more obvious action. And if you wait until then to respond, it's already too late. Because the first rule is this: the one who reacts emotionally loses. The angrier you get, the more you're being controlled. The more you try to explain, the more power you give them. They're not looking for logic. They're testing how easily your emotions can be pulled. And if you're easy to pull, you've already placed yourself beneath them. Machiavelli understood this well. He didn't choose to strike back. He chose to remove himself from the game right when it began. And so should you. When disrespected, you don't speak much. You withdraw your energy. Not to avoid the situation, but to confuse them. You stop replying to their messages. You don't look back when they call. You're still present, but silent. Like a vacuum in the room, a space with no response. No emotion, no explanation. And that's what truly unsettles them. Because people don't fear what they can predict. They fear what they can't control. That's how you shift the dynamic. Not by arguing back, but by retreating at the exact moment it counts. A kind of silence that makes them wonder, what just happened? And sometimes, that alone is enough to make sure they never try it again. And if your silence still isn't enough to make them stop, then it's time for the next step, the one that forces them to expose themselves. But not through reaction, not through retaliation, through a well-timed question, sharp like a scalpel. Because the person who disrespects you is hoping you'll get angry, flusteret, or defensive. They want to see you lose control. What they don't expect is your calm. And you look straight at them and ask, gently but coldly, what did you mean by that? Or, how exactly would you like me to take that? These questions aren't meant to get an answer. They're meant to make them repeat what they just said, this time, under everyone's full attention. It's like slicing a precise line across the mask they're wearing. No blood, but fully exposed. In modern situations, it may not happen face to face. Disrespect might come through a message, a comment, a vague email. So your questions must follow that context. Just to be sure I didn't misunderstand, can you clarify what you meant? Or would you say that the same way if the manager were copied? It's not sarcasm. It's not a threat. It's a spotlight aimed at their weak spot. And when you ask with total calm, you flip the script. They're no longer leading the conversation. They're being watched. Your question slows down the air in the room. It turns heads. It forces them to choose. Either take it back or stand there in the mess they just made. And that, sometimes, hits harder than any comeback. Because cold precision unbalances people far more than loud emotion. You don't strike back. You cut at the right spot and let them reveal what they tried to hide. When you ask the question and they're forced to face their own words, the air drops. Nothing feels the same anymore. And this is where most people make a mistake. They think handling it once is enough, then go back to how things were. But if you return like nothing happened, you've just erased all the power you built. No, you don't return. You redraft. From that moment on, the relationship must be reframed. The way you speak to them changes. The way you appear in the same space as them changes. No more warmth. No more easy access. You don't act upset. You simply build a cold wall, an invisible boundary that everyone can feel. When they speak, you listen, but don't meet their eyes. When they laugh, you don't laugh back. When they invite, you politely decline. And something strange happens. The energy in the room begins to shift. Others start watching you. They feel the weight in your silence. They begin to choose their words more carefully. Because now, you're no longer easy to approach. You're not pushing anyone away, but you're not open like before either. You just stand there calm, quiet, clear. And that clarity creates a new order. People don't mess with what they don't understand. They don't joke with someone whose reactions they can't predict. And from that moment on, you no longer have to demand respect. You've re-established it not through words, but through distance. And that distance, when held firmly, becomes the most silent form of respect there is. But don't assume they'll stop for good. Some people don't learn the lesson until they've truly lost something. They'll come back, but subtler. A joke wrapped in just playing around. A forgotten mention in a team group. A loaded glance during your presentation. A vague comment on your social media. All of it is a test. Not to insult you, but to measure the boundary again. They're quietly asking, are you still holding the line? And this is when you cannot soften. You escalate the consequence disproportionately, so they remember this time is not like the last. If they joke at your expense in a meeting, you don't smile. You pause. Look them dead in the eye. Hold the silence for 3 seconds, exactly 3, then turn to someone else. Say their name, and move the topic forward. You're not ignoring them. You're erasing them socially. If they exclude you from an important email, you don't message privately. You reply all, with sharp but polite wording, reattaching them and adding a line, looping back in for full clarity. One sentence like a cold slice of steel. If they make a vague remark in a meeting, you don't gloss over it. You pause, look around, and say, just to be sure everyone's clear, especially about that last part. Not to embarrass them, but to frame their words under the brightest light. And if they message you privately with condescension, you don't reply emotionally. You don't reply at all. But 3 days later, when they need something, you respond publicly in the group. Neutral tone. Exact timing. Just the necessary info, not one word more. That coldness makes them realize you're still there. But they no longer have the same access to you. And that's what people fear most. Not your anger, but the fact that you no longer need anger. You simply make decisions. And when you do, others adjust themselves so they never dare to test you again. And if they still don't stop, if after everything they keep pushing, then it's time you stop just defending. You don't get angry. You don't retaliate. But you hold up a mirror in public, not to humiliate them, but to let them see themselves. This isn't shaming. It's social counterattack, precise, calm, and undeniable. They make a mocking joke about you in a meeting. You don't deflect. You tilt your head, keep your gaze steady, and ask, do you use that joke with clients too? The room goes silent. Heads turn, and in an instant, no one is laughing. No insults needed. Just the right question at the right time. If they make a snide comment at a company party, you might ask, I'm curious, would you say that to our boss? Or, if that moment was caught on camera, would you want it played back? You don't add sarcasm. You don't smirk. You just make sure everyone hears clearly what they were supposed to miss. In public setting, those who like to wound often survive by thinking, no one's really paying attention. And you are the one who ends that illusion. If someone leaves a disrespectful comment online, you don't argue. You respond with a single, effortless sentence. Thanks for sharing your personal opinion in public. Or, more sharply, have you ever sent that comment to anyone in your family? It's not rude, but it's sharp enough to make them stop and think, what did I just do? And that feeling of being seen is the hit they never expected. You don't need to embarrass them. They take off their own mask. And more importantly, others are watching. They see you not getting dragged into petty reactions. They see you standing still, calmly reflecting. And just like that, from the target, you become the one in control. You don't need anyone to defend you. Because the person who can make others defend themselves in silence is someone no one dares to provoke again. That's how you establish your position, not through surface-level dominance, but through truth, lit up at the right time, in the right place, with the right tone. And after you've reflected them in front of the crowd, after you've let no one escape the light of truth, something will shift without you needing to do anything else. People begin to act more carefully, not just around you, but with their own words and behavior. But don't stop there. This is the moment you step into a new state. No longer the smart reactor, but the unreadable presence. You're not cold, not warm. You are neutral, dangerously so. You become the shadow in the room. No one sees you clearly, but everyone adjusts their rhythm when you appear. They sit straighter, speak slower, choose their words with more care. Because you're no longer easy to read. You don't speak often, but when you do, each word seems to carry its own weight. No one is sure what might make you withdraw. No one dares assume they know you well. And that uncertainty creates a strange pull. You could sit silently through a 20-minute meeting, saying nothing, and yet people keep glancing at you. Not because you're more powerful than them, but because they can't tell what you're thinking, In the modern world, most people get read too quickly. Who's the joker? Who always yields? Who's easily offended? Who likes to show off? And once you're labeled, you're controlled. But you, from the moment you stop reacting in predictable patterns, you remove the label. You become a quiet question mark, not because you're trying to be mysterious, but because you've learned not to give away too many signals. And then, every interaction around you begins to shift. People tread more carefully. Group chats with you in them become less reckless. Meetings you attend go off-topic less. Those who once saw you as someone they could joke with fall silent a little longer before speaking, not because you threaten them, but because your presence becomes a boundary that needs no explanation. You don't ask for respect. You make it so they don't dare be disrespectful. And that's when you reach the phase where you no longer need to defend yourself, because no one dares to test you anymore. And eventually, they will come back. Not with the same attitude, but with a different mask, softer, more polite. They'll offer a half-hearted apology. They'll force a nervous smile. They'll try a few casual lines, testing to see if the wall you built has come down. But you don't need to react. You don't scold them, and you don't reconcile. You simply remain. Like a room where the lights have been turned off, not cold, not dark, just absent. And it's that absence that carries weight. You don't need to say, "I'm not the same anymore." They feel it on their own. They speak to you, but you no longer respond the way you used to. They search for your eyes, but all they receive is a gaze that looks through them as if they're standing behind a one-way mirror. They can see you, but they're no longer sure you still see them. And that is the most unsettling moment for those who were used to your attention. Not because they're being punished, but because they no longer have access. Your silence isn't emptiness. It's a structured decision. Every time you don't respond to their jokes, another brick is added to the invisible wall. Every time you keep your face still while they try to charm you, a layer of cold glass is placed between you. No one sees you clearly anymore. But you still see everything. And that's what confuses them. They don't know what you're thinking. They're not sure how you feel about them now. And because they don't know, they begin to limit themselves. They speak less. They stumble more. They don't dare take another step, unsure if that step would cross a line. And you still do nothing. You simply hold your posture like a forgiveness without warmth. Forgiveness not meant to mend, but to state, "I've moved on, and you're still standing where I left you." No bitterness, no revenge. Just a decisive withdrawal from the game they once knew how to play. And that this deliberate lack of reaction is the one punishment they'll never forget. And after everything, after the structured silence, after the one-way glass wall, after you withdrew without warning, you no longer need to do anything. You've become the force people begin to adjust themselves around day. Not because they fear you, but because they no longer dare to misread you. From now on, your presence is a choice. Not everyone gets access to it. You don't need to appear busy. You just need to be rare. No longer present everywhere. No longer replying to every message. No longer part of every conversation. But each time you show up, something shifts. The air slows. Voices soften. Words become more careful. Because everyone remembers You are the one whose silence alone is enough to stop them from making the same mistake again. One mistake is enough, and no one dares to try a second time. You only make that mistake once. From there, you don't need to set rules. Your selective presence becomes the new law. People don't call you distant. They call you untouchable, someone who cannot be harmed without consequence. And amid the noise of social interaction, you become the ghost that sees all. You don't insert yourself. You don't compete. But you see clearly. And because you no longer need to speak, every word you do choose to say is heard as if it matters more than the rest. That's the final image you leave behind. Not a loud victory, but a silent standard. A person who never demands respect because everyone already knows. You don't need to. You only need to disappear. And it is precisely that disappearance that no one will ever forget.